Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Kuf Mem Zayin Amud Beis. 6 lines from the bottom. Our Gemara quotes the Mishnah as saying, "Ein yardin lekardima." One is not permitted to go down into a certain nahar called the kardima. Ask the Gemara, my time, what's the reason why he cannot go into this nahar on Shabbos? Answers the Gemara, Mishum Pika, because of the clay that's on the bottom of this nahar, which is very slippery. When a person then walks on it, he'll slip, he'll fall, and his clothes will get wet, whereby he'll then come to squeeze them out and be over the malacha of libun on Shabbos. The Gemara now quotes the Mishnah as saying, "Ve'in oisin apiktoizin b'Shabbos." One cannot make a certain potion to cause him to vomit on Shabbos. Omar Rabbi Babachan Rabbi Yochanan lo shonu ela b'sam. Here we're talking about where a person is trying to vomit so that he will eat more, not because he's sick and he's in pain, but rather he wants to then alleviate himself from the food that he ate so they can have then more of an appetite to eat more food. That is also, he says, when it's with a sam, when he's using it as a potion to then cause him to induce vomiting, but not with his finger. Tanya Rabbi Nechemia Oimer, Rabbi Chem is taught in the following brayso, Af bechol oser, b'bnei hefsed oichlin. He says even during the week this would be oser, and presumably we're talking about either besam or with the finger if it's in order to then just enable a person to eat more, because then a person will be hungry and it'll be a waste of food, he'll have to then eat more. And therefore it's an issue l'chara of bal tashchis. The Mishnah now is quoted as saying, "Ve'in ma'atzbin es hakoton." A person cannot realign the cotton. Omar Rabbi Babachan Rabbi Yochanan lefufe yenuka b'Shabbos shapir dami. To wrap a child, to swaddle a child in such a way where then you put a belt around him so that he will then be more sturdy. That means that which caused the child during birth to have his limbs be a little bit more curved instead of straight, they're a little bent out of shape. By wrapping, by swaddling the child, that's mutter. V'hanan Tan asked the Gemara, "Ein ma'atzvin," but you're not allowed to then realign the child's limbs. Answers the Gemara, "No hasam." That which is stated in the Mishnah, which is also to do, is bechumrei shidra demechsi keboine. That's when you're going to then realign the vertebrae of the spine. That's when it looks like a person is being boine. A malacha of boine, it's similar to mechsi keboine. It looks like boine, whereby it's asur midrabanan. But over here, just to swaddle the child, in order to then keep his bones or his limbs from being curved out, that doesn't look like boine, because that's something that's normally done on a child that was not did not have a straight type of situation after his birth. In other words, that's something that's typical, but it's something that needs to be done midrabanan on the day of the birth because of the birth. Certainly that can be done. But we're talking about over here that here it's something just is not an unusual thing to swaddle the child. It doesn't appear to be like a malach of boina, therefore vada it's mutter. The Gemara quotes the Mishnah saying, "Ve'in machzirin es hashever." If a bone broke, you cannot set the bone on Shabbos. Explains the Gemara, "Amar Rabbi Chano bagareto Omar Shmuel." Rabbi Chana from Baghdad said the name of Shmuel on top of Kuf Mem Ches Amar Aleph. Halacha machzirin es hashever. The halacha, however, is that you could go ahead and set a bone that became broken on Shabbos, because if not, the whole limb will be at risk. Rabbi Bar Chana ikloi lepumpedisa. Rabbi Bar Chana from Eretz Yisrael came to visit the Torah town of Bavel called Pumbedisa. Loi ola pirkei de Rabbi Yehuda. He did not enter the shiur, the drasha of Rabbi Yehuda, the Rosh Yeshiva. Shadre la'ado dayole. So Rabbi Yehuda sent his shamish ado, and he sent to him, and he said to him, "Amar le'zil garbe," go and then confiscate his garment in order to then entice him to come to the drasha. Ozil garbe. He went and he then confiscated Rabbi Bar Chana's garment. Also, Ashkechei de Kodorish ein machziunas hashever. Rabbi Bar Chana came to Rabbi Yehuda's drasha now, and he heard him say that you cannot go ahead and set the bone that has been broken on Shabbos. Omar lei, so Rav Bar Chana said, Hochi amar Rav Chana bagadeto amar Shmuel, halacha machziunas hashever. I heard in the name of Rav Chana from Baghdad that said in the name of Shmuel that one could, set the bone that has broken on Shabbos. Omar lei, Rabbi Yehuda said, Shmuel halacha, he said, Chana didon, sorry. Chana is from Bavel, he's didon, he's amongst us. V'ha didon, and Shmuel is also from Bavel amongst us. V'lo Shmuel, and I didn't hear this. So says Rabbi Yehuda, V'la bedina garavtich, is it not midin that I then confiscated your garment in order to then hear this halacha correctly? And thereby that which it states in our Mishnah, the opposite, this was taught that the Mishnah's girsa is incorrect. Indeed, one can set a bone that has been broken on Shabbos. The Gemara now quotes the Mishnah, Mishin nefarka yadoi. If a person dislocated either his hand or his foot, the Mishnah says then a person who has dislocated that cannot put cold water on that area, because that will be clear that he's doing so for medicinal purposes. But he can roichet his whole body, and if he's nisrapeh, is nisrapeh. Says the Gemara, Rav Avyo Hava Yosef Kamei de Rav Yosef. Shanya leyadei, he dislocated his hand. Or Marlei, he says to Rav Yosef, Hochi mai. He did different types of things in front of Rav Yosef, and he inquired, is this okay? Osir, says Rav Yosef, that would be osir to do. V'hochi mai, what if I do it like this? And Rav Yosef again said to him, Amalei osir. Adahochi, meanwhile, ispach yodei. The hand that was dislocated of Rav Avia went back and became healed. Omar lei, so Rav Yosef said to him, Mighty boy, look, what were you asking in the first place? Hotnan, it states explicitly in our Mishnah, Mishnis parka yodoi or ragloi lo yitrufem bitzoinin aval roichetz kedarkoi ve'im nisrape. Our Mishnah says that a person dislocates his hand or his foot, then he cannot put cold water on that hand that has been dislocated, because it will be clear indication he's doing so for refuah purposes, and that's asur midrabanan. Rather, what he should do is he should then wash his whole body, and if indeed the dislocated hand is nisrapeh, it's nisrapeh, which means that our Mishnah says clearly that if a person dislocates something, you can't do something that will indicate that you're doing something for its refuah. So why were you asking those questions before? Omar le, he said to him, V'lotnan ein machziunas hashever. Did it not teach in the Mishnah that you cannot set a bone that was broken on Shabbos? V'omar Rav Chana ba'agadeto, Omar Shmuel alocha machziunas hashever. And yet, Rav Chana from Baghdad taught in the name of Shmuel that indeed it's the opposite. That means the Mishnah was incorrect. It was stated incorrectly. That indeed if a person broke a bone on Shabbos, it can be set on Shabbos. So therefore, over here as well, if indeed a person dislocated a hand or a foot, maybe something that appears to be for its refuah would be okay. Omar le, Rav Yosef responded, Kulhu bechade machta machtino. You're going to put it all together, just like one weave. Heicha de itmar itmar. That which was stated was stated. And therefore, the case where a person who broke his bone, that could be said, because that was stated as different than was stated as we have it in our Mishnah. But heicha de lo itmar lo itmar. That which was not stated, then you cannot say that this was then would also be okay if we don't know otherwise. Hadron aloch chavis. The next parak begins, Shoyel odam mechavero kade yayin v'kade shem. A person may borrow from his friend on Shabbos a jug of wine or a jug of oil. Ubilvad shelo yormar lo halveini provided that he does not use the language of halveini, may I borrow it, meaning like as a loan. The Gemara will explain the difference between she'ela and halvo'ah. And similarly, the Mishnah goes on to say, Ha'isha mechaverta kikaros. A woman from her friend can also borrow loaves of bread. V'im eino ma'aminoi maniach taliso etzloi v'oiso imo cheshbon la'achar Shabbos. If the person you are borrowing from will not believe you, will not trust you, that you're going to then give it back to him after Shabbos, then you can leave a talis with him. Just don't explicitly say that it's a mashkam, because that would be derech mekach or memkar, which is also midirabonon. And afterwards, you can make a cheshbon with him after Shabbos, but not on Shabbos, because that which you cannot do on Shabbos, you cannot say and speak about doing for after Shabbos. So therefore, make the cheshbon only after Shabbos. The Mishnah continues and says, "V'chein erev Pesach b'Yerushalayim shechal liyos b'Shabbos." Shabbos, when erev Pesach, the 14th of Nisan, comes out to be on Shabbos, the day when a person is obligated to bring a korban Pesach bein ha'arboim on the 14th, comes out to be on Shabbos, and that is doiche Shabbos. One is able to then bring the korban on Shabbos. It says over here, what happens if a person does not have a seh to bring the korban? Meiniach taliso etzlo v'noitel es pischoi. Then, similarly to Shabbos, also on Yontif is the same din. He can go ahead and leave his talis, an outer garment, as a mashkoin, and he can then make a cheshbon with him after Shabbos in regards to the seh that he then bought on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Amar leRove barav Chanon leAbaye, Maishno hashileini. What is the difference in the two Lashonos? We said in the Mishnah, a person is able to be shoyel, a chavis of yayin or a chavis of shemen, but just so they does not say halveini. Why is that different? What's the significance in the language of halveini? Why it's prohibited, whereas she'eleini is mutter? A she'ela, when a person borrows something, it implies that he's borrowing something, and that thing that he's borrowing is to be given back the same item, which also implies that the one who is lending him that object can also require that he give back immediately whenever he wants it, as opposed to a halva. A halva implies that it be given back even after its usage. In other words, a loan, for example, the classical loan of $1,000, it's not expected that you're giving back the same $1,000. The expectation is that you're going to use that $1,000 and return another $1,000. So two of you are going to make a halva of oichel. The assumption is that you're going to eat the oichel and return in place of that oichel that you ate other oichel, which also implies that the minimum halva, which is stated in the Gemara in Makos, is 30 days, if not stated otherwise, whereby a halva you cannot be toiveya from the loive within the 30-day period. You have to be a minimum of 30 days, which means an extended period of time, whereby a person who lends with a halva may write down that he lent somebody something so that he does not forget. So therefore, the implication over here is very significant. If a person says that he says a lush of halveini, then the one who is lending him may write down on Shabbos, and therefore that would be osir. Omar lei. So he says if that's the distinction, then hashileni loy osi lemichtov, halveini osi lemichtov. I'm sorry, this is already the explanation. That if he says halveini, because it's long term, it's a minimum of 30 days, so therefore it's likely that the malve will write down that he owes him the money, so he should not forget. Whereas a sheila, he's not going to write down. Therefore a sheila is permitted, but a halva is, to say the lashon halveini would be osir. Ask the Gemara, V'ha kivan de bechol, since during the week, zimnin, the boy le memor le halveini, sometimes a person who needs to say halveini, or v'amar le hishaleini, and instead he used the word hishaleini, v'lo kapid ilave v'asi lemichtov, and the one who lends him is not makbid that he used the word she'ela, and he will then understand to be truly a halva, and he will write down, because he knows he can't be tovea from him until at least 30 days later. Then b'Shabbos nami asel lemichtav. So then Shabbos will say the same thing. A person may use the language of sheila, and thereby maybe the lender will also write down. So it should be equally prohibited. Or malay, he said back to him, no, on Shabbos there's a difference. After the parentheses, b'Shabbos kivan dehishaleni hu desharu le rabbonon. Haveni lo sharu le. Since on Shabbos the Chacham said the lashon of she'ela is permissible, the lashon of halva is asur. Then minkra milsa v'lo asir lemichtav. Therefore, it will be a nik. It will be recognizable when he uses such a lashon. If he uses the word she'ela, that he will not come to write it down. Therefore, she'ela is mutter, but halveni would be asur. Says the Gemara, Vaiter Omole Rava Barav Chanon la Abaye. Rava Bar Chanan asked Abaye, said to Abaye another statement, another question. And he said to him, not related to what we were discussing before, but now the Gemara records another statement that he says to Abaye. He asked him, Michti, is it so? Let's see. Amru Rabban, and the sages said, Kol mili di yomtiv kama de esher de shinui mashaninon. On yomtiv, whatever you can do to make a shinui, one is obligated to do. If so, he asks him, Hani nishei de malyon chatzbayihu mayo, my time loy mishanin. When it comes to filling up a bucket of water on yomtiv, why don't they make a shinui? Or Malay Abai responds, Mishum de loy efsher, because it's not possible. What are they supposed to do? What kind of shinu can they make when filling up the bucket of water? Because you're going to say that they're filling up a large bucket of water, so you'll say the shinu is lemalu bechatz bezuta. They should fill up smaller buckets of water. That won't help because they're going to then have to walk more, because since it's smaller buckets, they're going to have to then walk more times, which will be an equal tircha, and therefore the shinu won't be effective. The malian bechatz bezuta, if you're going to say the problem is because they're filling a small bucket, therefore lemalu bechatz berabba, they should fill up a large bucket. So then that also is not going to be an effective shinui, because they're going to then add a heavier load, which again will make the shinui ineffective. We're on top of Kuf Memches Amud Beis. Nifrois Sudra, to put a sudar on top of the bucket of water as a form of a shinui, then asid de schita. That sudar, that beged, may then become soaked in the water, whereby a person will then come to be soichited. So that's not a valid shinui, and that can't be done either. Nichse benechtamo, if you're going to then put a lid on it, let's say like a wooden lid, then zimden mifsik va'asi lemiktere. Then it could be that the wooden lid that is tied to the bucket will then become undone, whereby a person may come to then tie it. It will be a kesher shel kayama, an iser deraisa. Hilkach lo esher. Therefore, a shinui in this case would not be possible.